Listen up, because what you're about to hear, it's the kind of story that makes veteran starship captains spit out their neural juice in laughter right before they realize it's not funny. Not funny at all. It's terrifying. It's the sort of tale that gets whispered in the shadowy corners of the Meridian Station, where beings from 1,000 different worlds gather to swap war stories and pretend they're not utterly horrified by what they're discussing. And trust me, when a six-eyed Vortilian starts sweating from places that shouldn't sweat, you know something went catastrophically wrong. Our story begins with Karvik, a Sernian warrior of considerable reputation. Considerable being the operative word here. His mandibles clicked with pure confidence as he strutted through the observation deck of the starbound Triumphant, his scaled chest thrust forward like a monument to his own self-importance. 2 meters of alien muscle, razor-sharp claws that had seen 400 combat engagements, and a brain that apparently had skipped the section on humility entirely. He was boasting. Again. "You want to know the secret?" Karvik announced to anyone unfortunate enough to be within earshot. His voice rumbled like distant thunder filtered through a rock tumbler. Deathworlders are all brute force and no strategy. Sure, they're strong. I'll grant them that much. But they're predictable. Biological automatons. Really. All muscle and stupidity. I've faced them 3 times. Do you understand what that means? A nervous Quillian trader sitting in the corner slowly lowered her beverage and locked eyes with the Sernian. She understood exactly what that meant. It meant Karvik was about to die. Not metaphorically. Actually die. Like literally cease biological function. But did she warn him? Oh no. Because what fun is that? It means, Karvik continued, his voice dripping with the kind of arrogance that only comes from never having met the right Deathworlder, that I am uniquely qualified to handle the bounty situation on Kepler Station. Capture one of them alive? Child's play. I've fought them before. I know their movements. I understand their primitive tactics. They're basically oversized primates with thumbs and anger management issues. The observation deck fell silent. Silent like the moment before a sun goes supernova. Silent like the pause between lightning and thunder. Silent like the instant an asteroid recognizes it's on a collision course with a planet. Then the docking bay doors hissed open. And she walked through. Her name was Vex Marlowe, and she was human, not the average Deathworlder, mind you. This particular specimen had credentials that could make a Thracian warlord weep. She was lean, athletic, with brown skin marked by scars that told stories of impossible survival. Her eyes were a sharp, calculating green that swept across the observation deck with the precision of a targeting system. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she wore the kind of expression that suggested she'd heard exactly what Karvik had been saying. And she found it hilarious. So Vex said, her voice smooth and dangerous, like honey poured over a blade, "You've fought Deathworlders before." Karvik's mandibles clicked faster. Whether from nervousness or confidence, nobody could tell. Probably confidence. Definitely confidence. Okay, definitely stupidity, but we'll call it confidence. 3 times, he stated, with the kind of certainty that only comes from profound miscalculation. And I'm still here, aren't I? Vex's lips curved into what humans called a smile. To the beings watching, it looked like a predator identifying its prey. She walked across the observation deck with the kind of casual stride that suggested she owned the place. Actually, she did own the place. She was here to collect a bounty, a dangerous artifact that had somehow ended up in Kepler Station's restricted vault. 3 times, Vex repeated, stepping closer to Karvik. Against 3 different fighters, or the same fighter 3 times. Different fighters, Karvik proclaimed, puffing out his chest even further. His voice resonated with absolute certainty. I am a conqueror of Deathworlds, the humans, the Zalmas, the Krillians. I have bested them all. Their strength is meaningless. Their speed, irrelevant. Their tactical genius, they have none. You see, the problem with Deathworlders is that evolution made them too aggressive. They think with their fists instead of their minds. It's pathetic, really. Vex stopped walking. She was now close enough that Karvik could see the details of her face, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the slight asymmetry in her nose suggesting it had been broken and healed, the absolute M-penis behind those green eyes that suggested she'd done things that would make most sentient beings question the nature of consciousness itself. "You know what the problem is with that theory?" Vex asked softly. "What?" Karvik's mandibles clicked slower now. Something in his primitive brain was starting to recognize that perhaps, he'd made a tactical error. "You're still here," Vex said, "and you're still talking." Before anyone could process what that meant, Vex moved. And oh, did she move. Her body flowed like liquid lightning, and what happened next was physics-defying. She didn't attack Karvik directly. No, that would be crude. Instead, she swept his leg with devastating precision, while simultaneously pivoting her entire body in a way that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of biomechanics. Karvik, despite his massive size and legendary combat experience, found himself airborne. His massive form crashed into the reinforced windows of the observation deck. The impact was tremendous. The windows held, but barely. Karvik's breath exploded out of his lungs in a sound somewhere between a hiss and a scream, and he scrambled to his feet with all the grace of an asteroid careening through space. "Oh no," Vex continued, casually adjusting her collar as if she hadn't just thrown a 2-meter-tall alien through the air like a sack of nutritional paste. "You misunderstood me. Let me clarify. I didn't say I fought different fighters 3 times. I'm saying you fought me before, Karvik, and you survived the first encounter purely on luck and the fact that I was bored." The observation deck erupted in gasps. The Quillian trader nearly dropped her beverage. Karvik's eyes, all 4 of them, widened to enormous proportions. Recognition crashed through his consciousness like a meteor strike. The last time he'd encountered a human warrior, he'd barely escaped with his life. He'd convinced himself it was an anomaly, a fluke, a one-time encounter with someone exceptionally trained. "You're," Karvik started. "The one who put you in a medical pod for 3 months. Vex finished cheerfully. "Guilty as charged. And you know what the best part is?" She cracked her knuckles with audible pops that seemed to echo throughout the entire station. "I'm having a really terrible day. My ship broke down. I haven't slept in 37 hours. And the replicators on Kepler Station are serving something they're calling food, which I'm pretty sure violated the Geneva Convention back on Earth." "What is a Geneva Convention?" Karvik wheezed, backing away slowly. "Exactly." Vex laughed, and it was the most terrifying sound in the known universe. "You don't know, which means you really should have been paying attention when I mentioned not surviving a second encounter." And as Karvik reached the doors, desperately trying to escape, Vex simply walked after him with the patient determination of something inevitable, something unstoppable, something that had absolutely nothing left to lose. Karvik ran. And when I say he ran, I mean the magnificent warrior of 400 combat engagements, moved through the corridors of Kepler Station, like a creature possessed by pure undiluted panic. His scaled feet thundered against the metallic floors, leaving impact marks that the maintenance crew would be grumbling about for weeks. Behind him, Vex Marlowe followed with the kind of unhurried pace that suggested she wasn't even remotely concerned about catching up, because of course she wasn't. The pursuing human moved with liquid efficiency, each step calculated, each breath controlled, each motion economical. She wasn't sprinting, she was stalking, and somehow that made it infinitely worse for Karvik than if she'd been running at full speed. "Come on, Karvik," Vex called out, her voice carrying through the station with eerie cheerfulness. "This is the fun part. Remember when I told you about the concept of fear? When we last met, you kept saying it was a weakness, that emotions made sentient beings predictable. Let me ask you something. How's that working out for you right now?" Karvik burst through a service junction, his massive frame barely fitting through the opening. He was heading toward the docking bay, toward his ship, toward salvation, toward safety. Basically toward none of those things. But desperation has a way of making terrible decisions seem like brilliant strategy. The Sernian warrior reached the docking bay entrance and slammed his palm against the access panel. The door hissed open, revealing his personal vessel, a sleek Sernian fighter, bristling with weapon systems that had never encountered a Deathworlder up close and personal. Weapons designed for distance engagements, for space combat, for situations where your enemy couldn't simply walk toward you through open corridors. Karvik practically threw himself into the pilot's seat, and his claws flew across the control panels with frantic urgency. Engine startup sequences roared to life, the ship's systems engaging in a cascade of mechanical growls and electronic chirps. The boarding ramp began to rise. Safety was inches away. Just inches. Then Vex stepped into the doorway. And she jumped. Not a normal jump, because nothing about Vex Marlowe was remotely normal. She launched herself into the air with the kind of explosive power that suggested human physiology had been optimized by several million years of surviving on a world that actively wanted them dead. She caught the edge of the rising boarding ramp, her fingers gripping the metallic surface with the kind of strength that came from hands evolved to climb, to claw, to survive. No, 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 Karvik screamed, which, to be honest, was a refreshingly honest expression of his emotional state at that precise moment. He slammed the acceleration controls, and the ship lurched forward with tremendous force. Vex was airborne. The ship had achieved altitude, and the human was now dangling from a boarding ramp that was heading toward the upper atmosphere of Kepler Station's asteroid complex. Any rational being would have released their grip. Any sensible creature would have accepted their inevitable doom and prepared for the peaceful embrace of vacuum. Vex pulled herself up. With one hand, her arm muscles bulged with inhuman exertion as she hauled her entire body weight upward while the ship was accelerating through a chaos of debris and asteroid fragments. Her free hand shot out and grabbed the upper edge of the doorway. With both hands now secured, she swung her legs with calculated momentum and kicked hard against the ship's exterior. The move was so perfectly executed, so precisely calculated, that her feet contacted the wing stabilizer at exactly the right angle. She transferred her momentum from the falling dive into a spinning rotation that brought her up and over, and suddenly she was on the ship's fuselage, clinging to its hull with the kind of determination that suggested she'd done this sort of thing before. Actually, she probably had. Inside the cockpit, Karvik's mandibles chittered with terror. He engaged the evasive maneuvers, spinning the ship, rolling it, diving through asteroid fields. None of it mattered, because Vex crawled along the exterior of the vessel like some kind of alien insect, her fingers and feet finding purchase on surfaces that should have offered none. She reached the cockpit viewport, and she smiled. Then she punched through it. The reinforced polycarbonate composite material, designed to withstand atmospheric re-entry and direct weapons fire, shattered under the impact of a human fist. Because apparently, evolution had given humans not just strong muscles, but an absolutely ridiculous skeletal structure that allowed them to channel impacts through their entire body without fracturing. It was UN fair. It was UN balanced. It was apparently how humanity had survived on a death world for millions of years. Vex reached through the shattered viewport and grabbed Karvik by the face. Her hand covered his entire head from chin to between his eye ridges, and she pulled. The Sernian warrior tried to resist, but the ship was still accelerating, still moving, and fighting against a human in zero gravity was approximately as effective as fighting the laws of physics themselves. Lesson time, Vex announced, and her voice was cutting through the howling rush of decompressing atmosphere like a perfectly sharpened blade. You want to know why Deathworlders are feared across the entire galaxy? It's not just the strength. It's not just the speed. It's not just the reflexes or the pain tolerance or the sheer biological redundancy that lets us function with injuries that would liquefy you. Karvik tried to scream, but his scream was drowned out by the sound of his ship's proximity alarms blaring like some kind of cosmic funeral dirge. It's because we adapt, Vex continued, hauling Karvik halfway out of the cockpit window. His scaled body dangled in the rushing wind of the depressurizing cabin. Every second you're fighting a human, we're learning. Every move you make, we're predicting the next one. You can be bigger, faster, stronger, doesn't matter, because we've got 3 million years of evolution that taught us that nothing stops us. She released her grip suddenly, and Karvik's momentum sent him careening backward into his own cockpit. He crashed against the back wall with the force of a meteor strike. His vision swam in and out of focus as black spots danced at the edges of his consciousness. "Here's the thing, Karvik," Vex said, pulling herself fully into the cockpit despite the explosive decompression still occurring. "You said you fought Deathworlders before. You fought one. Just one. And you've been bragging about it for 3 years. Do you want to know how I know?" Karvik couldn't respond. He was too busy choking on his own fear, and whatever Sernian equivalent of blood was currently attempting to escape through his mandibles. "Because I filed a report." Vex laughed. And she actually laughed. "Every encounter I have with an alien species gets documented in the Human Galactic Registry. It's part of our protocols. We track behavioral patterns, combat effectiveness, psychological responses. You fought me once, got absolutely dismantled, and then spent 3 years convincing yourself it was a fluke." She grabbed his collar and hauled him upright. Her green eyes burned with something ancient and primal, something that no amount of galactic expansion or technological advancement could ever fully eliminate from the human spirit. "So here's your second lesson, warrior," Vex said, and her smile was something beautiful and terrible all at once. "I wasn't bored last time. I was testing you. I was being merciful. That's what the first encounter was, a test. And guess what that means? This encounter is." Karvik's eyes went wider than should have been physically possible. "The real fight," Vex finished. And as the observation crews back on Kepler Station watched from their monitors, they saw something that had never been recorded in Sernian history. A Sernian warrior learning that the hard way, that sometimes being the apex predator on your own world means absolutely nothing when you meet something from a world where everything eats you first. The final message that came through the station's communication systems was simple, transmitted in perfect galactic standard by Vex Marlowe herself. "Tell the bounty board that Karvik sends his regards. He won't be collecting any more bounties. Tell them that humans aren't Deathworlders because we kill everything. We're Deathworlders because we survive everything. And that's infinitely more terrifying."